Tonight before you sleep, I want you to imagine something unsettling. What if the person destroying your confidence, draining your energy, and keeping you stuck isn't someone out there, but the voice you hear inside your head every night? The same voice you trust, the same voice you never question. And what if changing that voice for just 7 days could begin changing your entire life? Most people believe that the events of their day determine how they feel when they wake up the next morning. They assume that happiness, confidence, and peace are the result of circumstances. But there is something far more influential than external events. It is the silent conversation that takes place within you, especially during the final moments before sleep. Few people pay attention to it, yet it quietly shapes their perception of themselves and the world. Think about what happens when the day comes to an end. The distractions begin to fade. The phone is put away. The conversations stop. The responsibilities pause. For the first time in many hours, you are left alone with your own mind. And it is often in these moments that your deepest thoughts emerge. Some people replay embarrassing moments. Others focus on mistakes they made years ago. Many imagine worst-case scenarios about the future. Without realizing it, they spend the last minutes of their day reinforcing fear, self-doubt, and anxiety. The mind does not simply ignore these messages. Repetition gives thoughts power. When you repeatedly tell yourself that you are failing, your psyche begins to organize itself around that belief. When you constantly focus on what is missing, your attention becomes trained to search for lack. Over time, these patterns become so familiar that they feel like objective truth. You no longer see them as thoughts. You see them as reality. This is why two people can experience the same situation and walk away with completely different interpretations. One sees a challenge and believes it is an opportunity to grow. The other sees the same challenge and believes it is proof of personal inadequacy. The difference is not the event itself. The difference is the inner narrative through which the event is filtered. Long before reality reaches your conscious awareness, it passes through the lens of your beliefs. The hours before sleep are particularly important because the conscious mind begins to relax its grip. The barriers between conscious thought and the deeper layers of the psyche become less rigid. What you repeatedly think and feel during this period sinks deeper than you may realize. It becomes part of the emotional atmosphere from which tomorrow's thoughts will emerge. In a sense, every night you are planting seeds in the soil of the unconscious. Whether those seeds grow into confidence or insecurity depends largely on what you choose to cultivate. Consider how often people end their day with statements such as, "I'm not where I should be, nothing ever works out for me, or I will never change." These phrases may appear harmless because they are familiar, yet each one strengthens an internal identity. The unconscious mind listens carefully. It does not distinguish between a passing comment and a declaration of truth. It absorbs the emotional meaning behind the words. Awareness is where transformation begins. The moment you start observing your inner dialogue, you step out of automatic behavior. You begin to recognize that not every thought deserves your belief. Some thoughts are echoes from old wounds. Some are fears that never became reality. Some are inherited voices from people who once doubted you. The simple act of noticing these patterns weakens their control. When you consciously choose different words before sleep, you are not pretending that life is perfect. You are refusing to let unconscious negativity write the script of your future. You are taking responsibility for the conversation that shapes your reality. Night after night, this small practice begins changing not only what you think, but also how you see yourself, how you interpret the world, and ultimately how you live within it. Many people spend years trying to become stronger, happier, and more successful, yet they unknowingly wage a war against a part of themselves. They believe that growth requires eliminating every weakness, suppressing every fear, and hiding every uncomfortable emotion. Whenever anger appears, they push it away. Whenever sadness surfaces, they distract themselves. Whenever insecurity speaks, they silence it. What they do not realize is that the parts of themselves they reject do not disappear. They simply retreat into the shadows of the psyche, where they continue to influence thoughts, behaviors, and emotions from behind the scenes. The human mind has a remarkable ability to hide what it does not want to face. Traits that conflict with our ideal image of ourselves are often pushed out of conscious awareness. We prefer to see ourselves as rational, kind, confident, and in control. But beneath that image may exist fear, jealousy, resentment, loneliness, or self-doubt. These hidden aspects do not make a person bad, they make a person human. Yet because they are uncomfortable, most people spend enormous energy pretending they do not exist. The problem is that whatever remains unconscious tends to control us. A person who refuses to acknowledge their fear may become controlled by anxiety without understanding why. Someone who denies their anger may become passive-aggressive or emotionally distant. Another who rejects feelings of inadequacy may become obsessed with proving their worth to others. The shadow does not disappear when ignored. It simply finds indirect ways to express itself. Nighttime often becomes the moment when these hidden parts begin to speak. During the day, distractions keep them buried. Work, entertainment, social interactions, and endless activity create noise that prevents deeper self-awareness. But when the room becomes quiet and darkness surrounds you, something changes. The emotions that were pushed aside during the day begin to rise. Unfinished thoughts appear. Old memories return. Feelings that seemed absent suddenly demand attention. Many people immediately resist this process. They reach for their phones, turn on a video, or search for any distraction that will keep uncomfortable feelings away. They believe discomfort is the enemy. Yet what if those emotions are carrying important messages? What if the fear you keep avoiding is pointing toward a wound that needs healing? What if the sadness you suppress is asking to be understood rather than escaped? True psychological growth begins when you stop treating these inner experiences as enemies. Instead of asking, "How do I get rid of this feeling?" ask, "What is this feeling trying to tell me?" This simple shift changes everything. You move from resistance to curiosity. You stop fighting yourself and start listening. Imagine lying in bed and noticing anxiety about the future. Rather than condemning yourself for being anxious, you acknowledge it. You allow it to exist without judgment. You ask what fear lies beneath it. Perhaps there is uncertainty about a decision. Perhaps there is a desire for security. Perhaps there is an old wound that still seeks reassurance. By listening, you gain insight. By understanding, you reduce the need for the emotion to shout for attention. The shadow often contains not only pain, but also hidden strengths. Qualities that were discouraged in childhood, ignored by society, or rejected out of fear can become trapped in the unconscious. Courage, creativity, passion, and authenticity sometimes remain hidden because they once felt unsafe to express. When you begin exploring the shadow with honesty, you recover parts of yourself that have been lost. This is why the moments before sleep can become so powerful. Instead of running from what emerges in the silence, you learn to sit with it. You learn to observe without judgment, listen without fear, and understand without condemnation. In doing so, the parts of yourself that once felt divided slowly begin moving toward wholeness, creating a deeper sense of inner peace and self-acceptance. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing that harshness creates growth. They assume that if they criticize themselves enough, they will become better. If they focus relentlessly on their flaws, they will eventually eliminate them. If they are tough enough on themselves, success will follow. Yet when you look closely at the inner lives of many people, you discover a strange contradiction. They would never speak to a friend the way they speak to themselves. They would never tell someone they care about that they are hopeless, inadequate, or destined to fail. Yet these are often the exact messages they repeat in their own minds every day. The voice within becomes so familiar that most people stop noticing it. They wake up and immediately begin evaluating themselves. They measure what they have not accomplished, what they should have done differently, and how far they are from where they want to be. By the time night arrives, they have spent an entire day acting as their own judge, prosecutor, and critic. Then they wonder why they feel exhausted, anxious, or disconnected from themselves. The deeper problem is that constant self-judgment creates inner division. One part of the psyche attacks while another part tries to defend itself. Instead of moving toward wholeness, the individual becomes trapped in an endless internal conflict. Energy that could be used for growth is wasted on self-condemnation. The mind becomes a battlefield rather than a place of understanding. A wise guide does not ignore mistakes, but neither does a wise guide define a person by them. Imagine a teacher helping a student learn a difficult skill. The teacher may point out errors, but the purpose is improvement, not humiliation. The guidance comes from a desire to develop potential, not destroy confidence. In the same way, your inner voice should help you understand your experiences rather than punish you for having them. Before sleep, this distinction becomes especially important. The mind naturally reviews the events of the day. You may remember a conversation that went poorly, a decision you regret, or a goal you failed to achieve. In those moments you have a choice. You can speak to yourself like a judge who seeks evidence of failure, or you can speak to yourself like a guide who seeks understanding. A judge asks, "Why are you always like this?" A guide asks, "What can you learn from this?" A judge says, "You never get anything right." A guide says, "You are still learning." A judge focuses on personal flaws. A guide focuses on personal growth. The external event remains the same, but the psychological impact becomes completely different. This does not mean pretending everything is fine when it is not. Genuine self-compassion is not denial. It is the courage to face reality without turning against yourself. It is the ability to acknowledge weaknesses without making them your identity. It is understanding that imperfection is not evidence of worthlessness, but evidence of being human. Another powerful practice before sleep is replacing statements with questions. The unconscious mind responds strongly to questions because it naturally seeks answers. Instead of saying, "Nothing is improving," ask, "What progress did I make today that I may have overlooked?" Instead of saying, "Why do I always fail?" ask, "What is this experience teaching me?" Questions open doors that judgments keep closed. They encourage exploration instead of self-punishment. Over time, this shift begins changing your relationship with yourself. You become less afraid of mistakes because they no longer threaten your identity. You become more willing to grow because growth no longer requires self-rejection. The inner voice gradually transforms from an enemy that drains your strength into an ally that supports your development. And when the mind enters sleep after hearing words of wisdom rather than condemnation, it carries a very different emotional atmosphere into the deeper layers of the psyche, allowing healing, clarity, and confidence to take root in ways that often go unnoticed at first. Change often feels impossible because people expect dramatic results from dramatic actions. They imagine that transformation must involve a complete reinvention of the self, a powerful breakthrough, or a life-changing event. Yet most lasting psychological change begins in ways so small that they are easy to overlook. A single thought repeated consistently, a new perspective practiced daily, a quiet decision made over and over again. This is why the 7-day experiment matters. It is not about creating instant perfection. It is about proving to yourself that the direction of your inner world can begin changing in a surprisingly short period of time. For the next 7 nights, the challenge is simple. Before you close your eyes, become aware of the conversation taking place within you. Do not rush through it. Do not treat it as another task to complete. Instead, view it as a meeting with the most important person in your life, the person you become when nobody else is watching. The goal is not to force positive thinking. The goal is to create conscious thinking. On the first night, you may discover how automatic your inner dialogue has become. You might notice thoughts filled with criticism, worry, or disappointment. Do not judge yourself for this. Simply observe. Awareness itself is progress. For many people, the most powerful realization is understanding how much of their mental energy has been spent repeating the same limiting stories. What was once invisible suddenly becomes visible. By the second and third nights, you may begin replacing old patterns with more constructive ones. Instead of focusing entirely on what went wrong, you start acknowledging what went right. Instead of viewing every mistake as evidence of failure, you begin seeing mistakes as information. The external circumstances of your life may not have changed yet, but something important is already shifting. Your relationship with those circumstances is becoming healthier. Around the middle of the week, many people notice subtle emotional changes. They may wake up feeling slightly calmer. Situations that once triggered immediate frustration may feel less overwhelming. The mind begins creating space between an event and a reaction. This space is where personal freedom grows. When you are no longer controlled by every emotion that appears, you gain the ability to choose your response rather than merely react. Another interesting change can occur through dreams. The unconscious mind is active during sleep, processing experiences, emotions, and unresolved conflicts. When you spend your final waking moments engaging in honest self-reflection, the unconscious often responds. Dreams may become more vivid, symbolic, or meaningful. Certain insights that seemed unavailable during the day may emerge naturally. You may begin connecting patterns that were previously hidden from awareness. As the 7th day approaches, The greatest transformation is often not what happens externally, but what happens internally. You start noticing a different tone in your thinking. The harsh inner critic loses some of its authority. Self-awareness becomes stronger than self-judgment. You begin recognizing that many of the beliefs you carried about yourself were not permanent truths but repeated assumptions. Once seen clearly, they begin losing their power. What makes this experiment so effective is its simplicity. There is no need for special equipment, complicated techniques, or dramatic rituals. The only requirement is consistency. Every night, you consciously choose the words, questions, and attitudes that you allow into your mind before sleep. Night after night, these choices accumulate. They shape perception, influence emotion, and gradually alter the lens through which you experience life. By the end of 7 days, you may not feel like an entirely different person, but you may notice something far more valuable. You may realize that change is already happening. The way you speak to yourself is changing. The way you interpret challenges is changing. The way you understand your emotions is changing. And once these inner shifts begin, they often continue expanding far beyond the original 7 days, quietly transforming the foundation upon which your future experiences are built. Every night you stand at the threshold between the conscious and the unconscious. Most people cross that threshold carrying fear, doubt, and self-judgment. But for the next 7 days, carry awareness instead. Speak to yourself with honesty. Speak to yourself with understanding. Speak to yourself as someone worthy of becoming whole. And then watch what happens. Thank you for spending these moments with me today. Out of all the voices competing for your attention, you chose to sit quietly and listen to your own inner world, and that choice matters more than you may realize. As you leave this video, remember this. Your life is not shaped only by what happens to you. It is also shaped by the conversations you have with yourself when no one else is around. The words you whisper in the dark often become the reality you wake up to in the light. Tonight, before you close your eyes, be mindful of the voice you carry into sleep. Let it be a voice of honesty, understanding, and growth. Give yourself the same patience you would offer someone you truly love. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who may need to hear it. Your support helps this community continue growing and reaching those who are searching for deeper self-understanding. Until next time, take care of your mind, protect your peace, and never stop discovering the person you were meant to become. Goodbye, and may your next conversation with yourself be the one that changes everything.